In Daniel chapter 7 this evening. We began to look at Daniel 7 last week. We got through the first 8 verses of it. And in those first 8 verses, we read about a dream or a vision that Daniel had. And it was such a dream or vision that impacted him so much that he wrote it down, thankfully, for us, so that we have this information. And of all the Old Testament prophecy concerning end times, many believe that this second half of Daniel is probably some of the most important prophecy concerning end times. In the first 8 verses, we read about the dream, what Daniel actually saw in the dream. And he saw 4 beasts actually. The first beast he saw was a lion with the wings of an eagle. And we noted that this was very similar in what it pointed to as the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. We talked about the fact that the picture of a lion, the picture of an eagle, is images that were related in Old Testament writings to Nebuchadnezzar. I believe we read some scriptures last week from, I want to say Ezekiel maybe, and Jeremiah possibly. Let me look and see if I've still got that here. Yeah, is that what I had? Yeah, okay. So yeah, some scriptures from that tied it to Nebuchadnezzar. And we talked about the fact that he was given the feet of a man to stand up. And we talked about the fact that when Nebuchadnezzar was taken out by God, his kingdom was taken from him and he was sent out as a beast in the field. There was a point where God restored him and brought him back upright like a man and gave him a man's heart again instead of the heart of a beast. So we saw that as a picture of the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, which was the Babylonian kingdom. Because we talked about the fact that 4 kingdoms were represented just as they were in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of that image that he saw. The second animal that we saw, the second beast we saw rather, was that of a bear. And it was raised up on one side and it had 3 bones in its teeth. And we noted that again, this was in relation to the kingdoms that would come after the Babylonian kingdom, and the next kingdom that came after that was the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. And we talked about the fact that one of those 2 kingdoms was stronger, was raised up more than the other kingdom. The kingdom of the Persians was a mightier kingdom than that of the Medes. And we talked about the 3 bones, and the 3 bones being representative of the 3 greatest kingdoms that the Medo-Persian kingdom conquered, that being of Babylon, of Lydia, and of Egypt. So we saw that in relation to that Medo-Persian kingdom and noted again that it was very closely related to the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, relating to the shoulders and the chest and all that being divided. The third beast that Daniel saw in his dream was that of a leopard. But it wasn't just a regular leopard. It was a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. Now, already a leopard is a fast animal. Well, this was a picture of the Grecian Empire. And who was it that we note for having control of the Grecian Empire but Alexander the Great? And one of the things that is well known about Alexander the Great was the speed in which he conquered territory. He expanded his kingdom quicker than any of the previous kingdoms did. In a 10-year period, he expanded the kingdom bigger than the Medes and the Persians were able to, or the king of Babylon were able to. So we see the speed there of that leopard, but also having 4 wings. Well, wings represent speed as well. And when we think that Nebuchadnezzar represented in the first kingdom the lion with 2 wings, well, if a leopard's got 4 wings, that's going to make it what? Twice as fast, right? Well, his kingdom grew twice as fast as that of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, then we get to the 4 heads. We talked about the fact that Alexander's kingdom came to an abrupt end. Why? Alexander died 32 years old. And his kingdom was divided into, guess how many parts? 4 parts, represented by his 4 commanders being the 4 heads of the leopard that we see in that illustration there, in that dream or that vision. Well, then we came to that 4th beast. And this beast must have been unlike anything that Daniel has ever seen or could imagine. Because these first 3 beasts, although they sound almost mythological to us in the description, they start with a very base description, don't they? A lion, a bear, a leopard. But when he gets to that 4th beast, he has no description for it. All he can tell us about this beast is that he saw in this night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were like eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So this 4th beast that Daniel sees, he can't even give explanation for what it is, other than to tell you what he sees. It's got teeth like iron, and it's destroying everything in its path. And it's got this crown almost of 10 horns on top of it. And it's unlike anything that he's ever seen. But we noted here that we're moving along in the kingdoms. And we know that this is a description of kingdoms because we'll get to that next week. Because the angel that Daniel asks about it says, well, this is a picture of the kingdoms to come. And we saw also in the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel said, hey, this is a picture of these kingdoms to come. So we know that. So the kingdom that comes after the Grecian kingdom is that of Rome. And the description that is given here is one that many have said actually show the 3 phases of the Roman kingdom. The first phase being that where they just came in after Alexander and went out and just conquered. They just went out and stomped people into the ground. They were iron. And we talked about the fact that during the Roman age, during the Roman kingdom, is the age of iron as well. So we have iron represented in the teeth here. And in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, what part of the image that he saw was represented by the Roman kingdom? The legs and feet, which were made of what? Iron. And the toes of iron and clay, right? So there were 10 horns represented on this beast. And we noted that there were 10 toes also on that image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. So the first phase of this kingdom is described there in verse 7. Dreadful and terrible, strong, exceedingly great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was different than all the other beasts before it. Well, that's a picture of the Roman kingdom that would come that we've already seen. That went forth and conquered and destroyed and just took over everything. That second phase of the Roman kingdom is that of the 10 horns, or the 10 kingdoms to come. Now, we have not seen that phase yet. Those 10 kingdoms have not risen to prominence as of yet. That is a picture of something that is to come, that second phase. Well, if we have not seen the second phase, guess what we definitely have not seen yet? The third phase. The third phase is that of the little horn that takes out those 3 other horns and then takes over, basically. That third phase, that third kingdom, Roman kingdom, is that of Antichrist. So we saw this picture. We saw this image that he saw. And we were reminded of God's sovereignty over the kingdom of men. We saw 4 kingdoms that have come and gone, basically. The first phase of the Roman kingdom has come and gone. We've seen all these kingdoms come and go, and in all of these kingdoms, one went from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And who was in control of all of that? I want to make sure that we have good understanding about something here. What God does through his prophets, through these visions and dreams that he gives Daniel, these are not predictions. Predictions are based upon maybe patterns or some knowledge or deducing something based on other things that have happened. It's basically taking an educated guess. What God does is prophecy, because God knows the beginning to the end. He is involved in all of the affairs of men, all of the kingdoms of men. He is the one, according to Daniel 2, verse 21, he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. It is God that has established and removed every one of these kingdoms. He is sovereign over all the kingdoms of man. Now this week we're going to move ahead. We're going to look at a few more verses 9 through 14, Lord willing anyway. And in those verses we are going to see that God is sovereign over his kingdom. So I want to go ahead and let's just read verses 9 through 14 first, and then we'll go ahead and move through those verses as best we can. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body was destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So we see right away here this picture of the Ancient of Days. And God is sovereign over his kingdom as well. We mentioned already that this Daniel, second half of Daniel, some of the most important prophecies concerning end times. And these verses especially, because they are so closely related to other verses from the book of Revelation and other verses from other Old Testament prophecies concerning end times. These verses are important theologically. They're important concerning eschatology, end time study, and they are also important in Christology, the picturing of Christ throughout this. So we see first that God is eternal, or sovereign rather, in his eternality and in his purity. This first part of verse 9 that we read here, the King James says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down. Does anybody have anything different written there in whatever version you're reading?
As I looked, thrones were placed. One that was ancient of days took his seat.
Okay.
His raiment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. His wheels were burning fire.
Okay. That's what we were looking at. That first part there, the King James uses the term cast down. And when we hear that, it sounds almost like a bad thing. Like these thrones were thrown away kind of thing. But they weren't. The idea behind it, the Chaldean is the word remah, and it means to throw or to set in place, like his version said, to set in place. It's one of implying casting down, of setting up like what would be used for a place for a king in Middle Eastern type situation, where they would throw large pillows and things like that to prepare a seat for someone. So what we have here is the idea of these seats being set, being cast down, being set up. Very closely related to many verses. There's 17 different references to these seats in Revelation 4 and Revelation chapter 5. Just a quick example from Revelation chapter 4. Immediately, this is verses 2 through 4, immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven. Same wording, same kind of thing. And one sat on the throne, and he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and sardine stone. There was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats, same kind of thing. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment. They had on their head crowns of gold. So what Daniel is seeing is a very similar image to what John, who recorded the book of Revelation for us, saw. Now we're talking, of course, about two different languages here. You know, we're talking about Greek with John versus back here, Aramaic. So the words are different, but the description, the wording, the picture is the same. So these are thrones, basically, seats that are being established. So what's going on here is the beast, they're done. What's being established is the kingdom of God here. We see that term Ancient of Days. Yeah, Brian.
Talk about one that was ancient of days took his seat.
Right. We're just talking about that. The Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days is referring to God the Father. That is exactly who it is referring to here. It is the only place that he is referred to by this term is in Daniel as the Ancient of Days. But this is, again, a picture. If you relate it to what we just read in Revelation, immediately I saw a throne was set, and he that sat upon it, you know, we're talking about God sitting upon the throne here. And of course, we're going to get to that other part of it, the one that appears as like a son of man. We'll get there in a minute. But the Ancient of Days is God. God, the eternal one. The one that is without beginning, without end. We have this picture of him whose garment was white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool, a picture of his purity. When we talk about something that is pure white, it is an illustration of that purity. You remember the transfiguration of Christ that we read about in the New Testament? What is one of the observations that is made? His garment is a glowing bright white like they'd never witnessed before. And here the Ancient of Days is wearing this robe that is this bright white, and his hair is his white wool. And we think of also, when we think of somebody that's old, what goes along with age that we think anyway, we like to say, you know, when you get older, you get what? Wiser. We get wiser when we get older, right? With age comes what? Wisdom. So if we have somebody that has hair that is pure white, that is eternal, we know what about him? That he is wise. He has the wisdom of the ages. This is a picture of God the Father. It is a picture of him sitting upon his throne, that throne of judgment. It is a picture of his purity, his holiness, his righteousness. Now, if you go on and look a little further, it says that the throne has wheels that are like blazing with fire. Well, there are pictures of wheels also in Ezekiel. And when you read about the wheels in Ezekiel, it represents God just being everywhere. Well, when we think about this in the same context here, when we put wheels on the throne of God, is he limited? No. He is without limit where he goes, what he does. We know he is all-knowing, that he is omnipresent. He is everywhere. And we see fire. And usually when we read about fire, when we're referring to God of any kind, when we read in Leviticus about the fire that came out from the altar, what was it? It was a purifying, it was a cleansing fire. It is a holy fire. Did you have something you wanted to share? Okay. No. Okay. No, I thought you looked like for a second there you had something you wanted to share. That's okay. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, it says, "For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God." Hebrews 12:29, "For our God is a consuming fire." Yeah, and in Revelation 20, we see again that picture of fire flowing out from the throne of God. Revelation 20:11 through 15 talks about that flames coming out from the throne of God and the fire around him and before him, that stream of fire, a river of fire before him. So what we're seeing here in Daniel's vision is God's kingdom. His throne being established and set up, and seeing God sitting on that throne. But it gets better. It gets better. We see all those that are ministering before him and to him. Thousands ministered to him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. In Revelation chapter 5, verse 11, we read about all the millions of angels that serve before the throne of God. The same image. The image that Daniel is seeing long before John was ever on the face of the earth. Daniel is seeing in his vision. This end times, this preparation, this picture of what will become the great white throne judgment that takes place. And of course, we see that the Ancient of Days opens up the books. The judgment was set and the books were opened. And of course, the Ancient of Days, God the Father, he does everything by the book. He is always fair, just, and equitable. He gives what is right. We never have to second guess him. We never have to think about if justice is being served, because God is justice. There is no partiality and there is no unfairness in him. We see also that God is sovereign in his justice, and in his patience. Look again at verses 11 and 12. "I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time." Now we noted that the little horn, it had eyes, but it also had what? a mouth. And that little horn goes forth blaspheming God, trying to confuse people, trying to tell people that he is God. And what happens to the little horn? He's done. He's done. There is no chance for the little horn to recover. There is no chance for that one that is Antichrist to reign again. You notice there that his justice is quick and powerful concerning that little horn. But it goes on and it says in verse 12 concerning the rest of the beast. What were the rest of the beast? The lion with the eagle's wings, the bear that was lopsided with the 3 bones in its teeth, and that leopard with the 4 head and the 4 wings. Well, they were allowed to continue on. There are still remnants today of the Babylonian kingdom. There are still remnants today that we know of concerning the Medo-Persian kingdom. There are still remnants today of the Grecian kingdom. And right now, we see maybe some remnants of the Roman kingdom. But when this day comes, there will be no remnants left of that kingdom of Rome. God will destroy it completely. The other 3 kingdoms, they're around for a while. We saw Nebuchadnezzar take the correction and come back. His kingdom continued on for a while, just like the Medo-Persian kingdom continued on for a while. And so did the Grecian kingdom. The others had their authority removed, but they got an extension of life, at least for a period of time. They weren't as powerful. They weren't as much of a kingdom. And I think we read last week about that beast, that dragon in the book of Revelation. And we read that description. And it had features from the lion. It had features from the bear. It had features from also that leopard. But all that would be gone at this point. When God judges the little horn, whatever remains of the Roman kingdom now, it will be gone. It will be gone forever. His sovereignty is demonstrated in the Son of Man and in God's plan also. Verse 13 and 14 says, I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the cloud of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. When Daniel said he saw a person that looked like the Son of Man, he wasn't looking at somebody that was just in the image of a person. This was a divine being. When Daniel saw this, he saw him coming in the clouds of heaven, indicating that this person was coming from heaven to earth. He was in heaven, but he came down now to earth for this time. Now, this Son of Man reference is one that Jesus used himself probably 80 times in the New Testament. And this image that Daniel gives us here is something that Jesus himself alluded to. When Jesus was standing before the high priest in Matthew chapter 26, and the priest asked him, "Art thou the Son of God?" Jesus spoke to him and referenced these very verses. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Jesus referenced this exact scene that Daniel saw in his vision, that he is coming to the right hand of God the Father, that he is there present in the clouds. This is the Son of Man. This is Jesus that we see here. This title that Jesus used himself 82 times at least in the New Testament. The clouds of heaven remind of his promise to return in glory and reign on earth. Matthew chapter 24 verse 30 says this, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." This is a picture of Christ coming into that position of power. Daniel says that the Son of Man was giving eternal dominion over the nations of the earth, that he would be worshiped and served by all people, all nations, all languages. We see in Daniel's dream the Son of Man approaching the Ancient of Days to receive that reward of eternal dominion over all the people and all the nations of the world. Described again in Revelation chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. Chapter 5, verse 14 also. Christ has received the kingdom of the world because of his atoning death on behalf of all of us. After his death on earth, Jesus ascended to heaven, where he is seated at the right hand of God the Father. And there he will remain until he comes in the clouds of glory to establish his kingdom here on earth. Daniel also says that the Son of Man will rule a kingdom that will never be destroyed. History has witnessed one bloody war after another, but war with all its devastation and death will come to an end. When Christ returns to set up God's kingdom on earth, he will set the whole universe free from the bondage of sin and corruption. At last, peace and righteousness will fill the earth and the entire universe, and all the beings in both heaven and earth will love, worship, and serve the Son of Man forever. God is sovereign over his kingdom. Next week we will see, Lord willing, the rest of chapter 7, and we will see that God is sovereign in all of his judgment concerning mankind. Let's have a word of prayer, shall we? Lord, we thank you for this time together this evening to pray and to study your word. Help us, Lord, to retain all that is useful, Lord. And Lord, help us to be waiting patiently, vigilantly, and Lord, with just our eyes fixed on you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.